everyone. This is Monica Michelle with Explicitly Sick for Invisible Not Broken. And today I'm interviewing Allison Alexander. And she's the writer of Super Sick Making Peace and Chronic Illness, which is an amazing book about her and others' chronic illness journey and disability journey, along with a lot of pop culture, Doctor Who, lots of nerdiness. So you can understand why I jumped on this interview. We did have a tremendous amount of technical difficulties. We are recording during COVID, and Zoom suddenly became an essential service. So we did our best. It is a fairly long form interview. I might break it up. We'll see how much energy I have today. And I really hope you listen. I think it's really a great episode. We talk about her dealing with her IBS. Lots of nerdiness. We talk about the choice on children. We talk about how important representation is in pop culture, and a lot about superheroes. And of course, we had to throw in some Daleks and Cybermen if we're going to talk about disability and mental health in geekdom. I hope you enjoy this. Please take a look at our show notes. That's at invisiblenotbroken.com, and you will find all of the links for Allison. Her blog is amazing. One of my favorite posts of hers was about how to write an effective villain and what to do and what not to do with a villain who has disabilities or chronic issues. And if you're taking part in NaNoWriMo camp or NaNoWriMo, depending on when you're listening to this, this is definitely something to go and take a look at. Even someone with disabilities, if you don't have that disability or that mental health issue, it would be really important to take a look at this and make sure that you get your character right. It'll make for much better writing and also much better viewing and reading. I think as we start to understand these issues, we'll get more complicated and interesting characters. So please enjoy. Please head over to invisiblenotbroken.com and go to our show notes and read through Allison's blog. It's amazing. It's super fun. Her writing style is very, very entertaining and good. And also, please buy her book. And we are self-funded, so if you head over to Patreon, if you can, and you find value, please consider becoming a patron. If that is not your jam, but you're getting value and you'd like to help out in other ways, share the episode. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great week. Be kind, be gentle, be a badass. I've been really looking forward to this. I even wore my Wonder Woman t-shirt. I'm sure you can't see it, but
nice. I love it. I think I'm wearing Studio Ghibli. You can
yay!
see Donald Reagan on it.
I love it. Allison, I actually poached you from my co-host. She usually does the anyone who's not just a regular interview, but you mentioned geeky and nerdy, and I stole you.
Oh, yay. Well, I don't have a problem with it.
I'm so glad. I did a deep dive into your blog this whole weekend.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I've been I have a page of notes.
Oh, I'm excited.
So I will try not to annoy you too much, but I really want to talk about the villains blog post you wrote.
Okay.
But I thought we'd start with being a sick kid, because I think that kind of shapes us when we're sick as kids. So if you could start with that. I think you said you were 8 when it all started.
I actually don't remember not being sick, so it's kind of like a guess that it was around 8.
That's fair.
Yeah. So this is all I've ever known, really. I'm sure there was a time when I wasn't, but yeah.
So how did that present?
What was the illness like?
What started?
It's just I have severe IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So I would just get random attacks of pain, and for a kid I feel like that was a lot to handle, but it was just kind of everything. It was just what I knew, so I don't think I realized it wasn't normal until a little bit later when all the kids I was friends with didn't have that. I was like, oh, this is something I'm dealing with on my own. And I don't really, my mom also had IBS, so I had her. She was kind of my support system for it. And otherwise, I didn't have anyone else I knew who experienced this kind of thing. Even a different kind of illness, I think it's a little bit rare for a kid just to go through that.
It's so weird
So,
because you're trying to figure out what it means to like the Emily Dickinson, like be in the body, and like
yeah.
you're trying to figure out what this whole avatar thing is. And when no one else's avatar is lining up with yours, it can get a little lonely.
Yeah, it was lonely, and I also I was never told this. I just decided that it was something that I had to hide from people because it didn't seem normal. So I was just like, oh, this is something that is, and also IBS is kind of like a socially inappropriate illness, you know. It's to do with bowels and bathrooms and kind of especially for when you get into teenager, it's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, we've
And
we've definitely talked about this on the podcast.
yeah, yeah.
um,
So
it's not like
I
pretty disorders where people like start marches and feel sorry for you, and like you can make a
yeah,
Victorian with it. It's
I know. There, yeah, a lot of my illnesses are like inappropriate like that. So I've just had to be like, okay, this is fine. Other people have this, and maybe it's good that I am talking about it candidly. So
I can't tell you how good it is. We've had people who have had IBS be on the show and talk about like
mm,
having to almost have accidents in like places, and we get a whole bunch of fan
yeah,
mail about people going, "Thank you for making that less embarrassing," or at least
yes,
that everyone's talking about appreciated. So,
yes,
thank you for,
exactly.
especially for your book. I got to read a few chapters, and I was head over heels. I can't wait till it comes out so I can read
Oh
the whole thing.
yay! Oh,
But you
that makes
talked
me
about your really fierce mom, and
hmm
kind of wanted to start with that. I'm sorry, Siri is very active today.
Oh, that's okay.
Tried to keep her quiet. I thought I had turned her off, but
I didn't hear anything, so
oh, good. Well, we'll just put Siri in a drawer for a minute,
okay.
as I guess we should all do.
Yeah.
um, but you talked about saying, about you being quiet about things and trying to, I guess, pass is the word that I'm coming up with in my little addled brain this morning, but
Mhm.
pass as healthy for other people. Did you ever read Guts?
Yes, actually, I just a few weeks ago, before, well, maybe a month ago, before COVID happened, I got it from the library.
We're
I
gonna
was
call this
like,
BC from now on.
yeah, I know, right? And I loved it. I was like, there's a book about IBS. What? It was amazing. And it was a comic like that made my nerdy heart very happy.
Everything about that writer I love, and I was so excited to see that book.
Yeah.
But I'm very good at getting off track, so always prefer like you can rein me in at any time.
Sure.
But you had talked about how you had been hiding things for so long, but no one noticed that you were in so much pain. You ended up having an appendix burst, and
Oh yeah. I was 10 or 11, and well, what really happened is my parents had been away for a while on vacation, and I'd been staying with my cousins, and my cousin had got this really, really bad flu. And so, and his parents thought it was appendicitis, and then they brought him to the hospital, and it wasn't. It was just a bad flu. And so, my poor parents, I can't blame them for not taking me to the hospital because they're like, oh, she just caught what
yeah,
her cousin had. It's fine, you know. And then at one point, I was so sick, and then at one point, I started just shaking and like couldn't stop. And that's when they brought me to the hospital. That's probably when it I don't know. I don't know. It's probably when it ruptured, and so they had to operate after the appendix had ruptured, which isn't ideal for appendicitis.
no,
That's
you have to
very
get there
dangerous.
before all the stuff
Yeah.
is floating around.
Yeah. So I ended up being in the hospital for about a month after that due to complications, which was terrible for a 11-year-old kid. It was not fun.
That is horrifying.
Yeah, and one of my doctors has been very suspicious that that made all my bowel issues worse because you had poison all over your bowel, and then you have to have it like all it was all cleaned with antibiotics or whatever, so my natural flora was all wiped clean and everything. So
Yeah,
uh,
anyone who's had major antibiotics and you did
yeah,
not get the note to make sure your gut flora comes back, that leads
yeah.
to a mess.
Yeah. There's a fair bit of research that gut flora and IBS are kind of interlinked. So,
That's fascinating. I've heard about the fecal transplants as being
hmm
a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about that too. I haven't had that done. Like, I think when my doctor talked to me about it, she was like, you usually do it with like a family member, and most of my family members are like also not healthy.
It's
Like,
not going to
so
help.
so I'm like, I don't know if that would do anything. So
That's crazy. There's been so much new research done in like the gut biome and how it affects even like our moods and our health.
yeah,
And
it's
yeah.
all connected, I think.
Okay, so in a weird twist of fate, right before we went on, I was reading on Board Panda because that's like my site to go to in the mornings before I
Sure.
like even look at the news. But it was a whole thing of like celebrities screwing up and entertainment. And
Uh-huh.
they had a thing on Gal Gadot, who played Wonder Woman.
Mhm.
And when Stephen Hawkins died, she had posted this thing that was well meant but ill intentioned. Congratulations on your freedom, basically, from your body. And
Okay.
yeah, I got into a little bit of a disagreement with some people who felt that was a little snowflakey of people to call that ableist. And I went back to like your blog posts about how the representation for disability
Mhm.
is complicated. Let's put it as complicated.
It's not great. It's been done very badly in the past.
Yeah, and when Stephen Hawkins died, I felt like that was a really big moment where it really showed just how much like people felt like it was almost better to die than to be sick.
Yeah, that's one of the problems. Um, Another one is well, I did a blog post about villains in particular, and then I have a also just in general things to avoid when you have just characters in general. Villains especially is like making physical deformities in your villain just so that they look scarier,
Mm.
which isn't super great because then people who do have those deformities are like, well, I'm not a villain. I'm not, connecting that disability with the villain's evilness is also a big one. Like, oh, they're disabled because they're evil is also another one. Like, it's a consequence of their evilness, and that's also problematic.
You know, such a good part about the blog of, and I'm forgetting which character it was, so please forgive me. But the one who was in chronic pain, who was like willing to like destroy the world to find a cure for chronic pain for her particular chronic pain.
Oh yeah, that was Ghost from Ant-Man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is not what I'm familiar with. I
Yeah.
yeah, fall more on the fantasy side of
Sure.
geekiness, but
Yeah.
Doctor
Yeah.
Who, we can go on for hours. But
Oh man, Doctor Who, so good.
right? Oh my God. Yes, we can totally go there.
Yeah.
But superheroes, I more just watch the movies once in a while, and
Yeah.
comic books, I'm more of a Neil Gaiman freak.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. But it so seems like no one talked to anyone who's in chronic pain who decided that someone would. I don't know anyone in chronic pain who would injure others
Yeah.
to
I
just
mean,
help themselves.
I understand why writers do that. It's like, oh, this is like a great motivation for this character. They're in so much pain that they'll do this thing. But it's been done so much for villains, and it's just overdone at this point, and it's just problematic the way that like people in chronic pain, for one thing, we're not we probably don't have the energy to do all this villainous stuff. Like most of us are just trying to get through the day. So like
When you're not sure you can finish brushing your teeth, you're probably
yeah.
taking over the world.
So when there's this villain who's like in so much chronic pain and like, you know, kicking people over and running around doing stuff, I'm just like, really? I don't think that I mean, I like that there are characters with chronic pain and that writers are trying to include them. So like I applaud their effort,
You're much kinder than I am.
but there are better ways to do this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I actually came up with a checklist for myself that you can access if you subscribe to my newsletter, just to go through things when I see fictional characters with disabilities, just to check like whether they're being done okay or not.
We need a Bechdel test for
Yeah.
disability. Like that would be nice. I like the Bechdel test for the reason it was invented, but
Yeah.
I think when you went for disability too,
Yeah.
or more disabled, right? Or what you put in your blog posts are fantastic for writers and aspiring writers, especially Camp NaNoWriMo right now.
Thank you.
Um, but it's a great checklist of like how to really think through disability, like the wild idea of ask someone who's disabled.
I know.
Shocking.
Like, how do you not think about that one? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, that seems like a big moment. Like, and I'm really glad to see NaNoWriMo is really good at having the forums. So I've seen a lot more people posting in forums, like I have a blind character. What would this feel like, or what would this be like, or how would sound? Like it's
yeah, that's great. I
yeah.
think writers are so used to just trying to put themselves into their characters that I think sometimes they forget maybe certain topics are better if they actually ask
Well,
experts on it.
going back to the chronic pain thing, that reaction of I will do anything and everything to solve this pain issue sounds like someone who's only been in chronic, like extreme pain for short periods of time.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, it's so hard to understand chronic pain if you haven't experienced it. Like it's so hard to imagine being in pain all the time. Like just imagine having the flu and that awfulness you feel and knowing that's never going to go away. It's really weird to wrap your head around if you've never experienced that, because most healthy people always have that horizon of happiness and health to look forward to. Like, oh, this isn't forever. This is going to be okay in, a week or whatever.
Or the Dr. House trope of we will get a team of brilliant minds together that will solve this.
Yes, and we'll solve it in 45 minutes.
No matter
Yeah.
what. And we will get this, there's an answer and we will figure it out no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
It
fun
makes for a great TV show, but it's not super realistic for chronic illness.
it leads to very unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, for sure.
So for your book, how did you I love that you're bringing in things like, because True Ravenclaw, things like Harry Potter. I loved your chapter on the werewolf. So if you
Oh,
could
thank you.
expand a little bit about, you pulled in Doctor Who. How did you decide to bring like all of the favorite fantasy characters into disability and chronic illness?
Well, so I've been writing articles on pop culture, like on various websites and stuff, for several years now. So it's kind of my jam is like writing on pop culture. And also I'm a huge nerd, so obviously I just think that way. So when I started thinking, oh, I wrote a couple articles on chronic illness, and I was like, I have more to say on this topic, I think. And also I tend to when I write, it's cathartic for me. So I almost like figure things out and figure out how to better deal with things emotionally through writing. But I don't keep a journal or anything. Like I find it hard to write with no purpose. So I was like, so I almost more wrote this book for myself to like figure out how to deal with this better emotionally than I had been. And it was quite helpful in that way, actually, for myself.
Therapy's expensive.
Yeah, right. So it worked for me. And I don't know, it just seemed natural to me to bring pop culture in because that's such a big part of my life. I'm just such a huge geek, and I see these shows and characters, and when I see them done well, it makes me really excited and happy, and feel a little less isolated. Maybe like, oh, that there's a hero who has an illness. That's really cool. Like the show isn't just about their illness, and they're not being like an inspiration to others. That's not their whole. It's just
inspiration porn. Save us from inspiration porn.
Yeah. So that makes me happy. So I was like, maybe there are other people like me. I feel like I'm a bit of a niche, this chronic illness pop culture person, but maybe there are other people who will also, feel like that's something they can connect with, these topics. So I wrote the book.
Or what are some of the characters that you think are done well?
I talk about a lot of them in my book, and there were some that I had in a list and I just couldn't like fit in.
Ah,
So I list them all at the end of the book in case you like want to go in and be like, who's
no, I totally want to. I was
yeah.
only able to access a few of the chapters from your website, but I will definitely be going into a
Oh,
deep
for sure.
dive. Is there
Yeah,
any that didn't make it into the book that you wanted to just give a special shout out?
So uh are you an anime fan?
In high school I was. I am not anymore. My teenager is more into, and I tried to like kind of
Okay. Yeah,
eye
yeah, yeah.
from the side to make sure it's not the anime I was watching as a teenager. And
So the first anime I watched, I thought anime was stupid as a high schooler, and I'm like, that's dumb, that's for kids. And then one of my cousins was like, no, you have to watch this anime called Full Metal Alchemist. It's so awesome. And I'm like, all right, I'll watch one episode. And then of course I couldn't stop watching after the one episode. So there's a character in there. Her name's Izumi Curtis, and she calls herself a housewife. That's how like she describes herself, but she's like this badass alchemist who's really awesome. And every so often she'll have to stop what she's doing and just throw up blood because she's got I think she had some of her like innards rearranged or something due to a accident. And so that was the very first character I can remember seeing and being like, she's sick and she's awesome. Like, that's so cool. So like I don't have a chapter on her in the book, but she is one of my favorites. There are some problems with her character, like she's not the best example of chronic illness, but I still really love her. And then I also really loved so the upcoming Thor movie, Jane Foster is becoming Thor. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is what's happening.
I believe you.
Yeah, yeah, okay. It's based on a comic that I had read where she becomes Thor, but she also has cancer. And so I read that comic, and that was another one that I really loved, and I didn't manage to fit into the book. But so she like every time she turns into Thor, her cancer's better, but then when she goes back into being Jane, the cancer's back, and so she'll like go have her cancer treatments and chemotherapy and everything. But then if she turns into Thor, that chemotherapy is all like undone. So it was really interesting, her story. But I love that she's a superhero and she's sick. So that was
It's an
very
interesting way to like create that moving forward of her character without falling into expected tropes.
hmm yeah. I thought it was done well. And she talks about like, oh, I could just stay in my Thor form forever and not be sick. And I'm like, well, you should do that.
Yeah, that's
Like,
like the option, right? Like we do that one.
but she's so self-sacrificial, and like this world needs Jane Foster as well as Thor because she's one of the what's the word? She's like a representative of Earth and on these councils or whatever Jane Foster is. So her job is important, and so like, oh, that's really I don't know if I'd make that choice if I were you, Jane. I would probably have picked being healthy, but good
Yeah,
for
that,
her.
that one.
So.
Well, we can go into Doctor Who for a second. I was just
Mhm.
thinking like where Doctor Who falls in all of this because that's where my brain usually goes to things. Cybermen and Daleks, I find really
Oh
interesting in the
yeah.
removal of the body and also emotions. So
Mhm.
it's almost as if you deny all human frailty or quote unquote frailty of mental and physical, what they would consider weakness, what that ends up looking like, which, not great. Snarky, but not great.
I often joke about wanting my feelings removed because sometimes it's just so stressful. And then my husband reminds me, oh, but those are what make you you, and you need those. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay.
We can go full Vulcan.
Yeah. So, yeah, those. I like the idea that if we didn't have our emotions, we would kind of become villains. That makes me feel a little bit better about having them, I guess.
Have you ever watched The Magicians?
Yes. One season, two seasons,
Oh
I think it
God.
was.
Okay. Sorry. That's my other like, oh my God show. I've watched every episode probably about four
Oh
times now.
yeah.
Yeah, it's obsessive. I'm writing a novel right now, and the character development on this and the way that a group of people work together is kind of like unparalleled in how the characters work and the dialogue. So I watch
Mhm.
it over and over again anytime I need inspiration for something. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's my go-to. But they have this one scene where they remove all their emotions, like right in the middle of like
Oh
a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
big
I remember
fight.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And some of them are like, yeah, this is great. And then a couple of them were like, no, we're going to try and figure out how to do this
Yeah.
like with our emotions intact. I'm like, that's a healthier response.
Well, I think they kind of like brought it back to like addiction, where yes, you can remove dealing with the issue right now, but you're going to deal with it so much more later when it all comes
Yeah.
back. Like the feelings are not going to like stay like just as they
Yeah,
were.
like you can't just shove them away. At some point, they
Yeah, they
will
just
come
get
up.
bigger
Yeah.
in the dark has been my experience.
Yeah. And with chronic illness, they just sometimes bubble up. You just get at certain points you just get so exhausted and don't want it to be going on anymore, and yet it will be, and so yeah, I definitely tackle mental illness in my book as well. I talk about both depression and anxiety are things that I've experienced, so there's whole chapters devoted to those.
Like a lot of us nerds and geeks have the anxiety and depression. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in general
no,
do.
that's
Maybe
fair
it is
too.
more prevalent in nerds and geeks. I don't know. I feel like we're becoming more accepted and cool, I guess. So like,
It's not like
uh,
it was back when I was in high school, centuries and centuries ago, where it was considered like the worst thing you could be called.
yeah, yeah, it's actually almost a term of coolness now.
Yes.
If you're a nerd,
It is definitely a different world now.
yeah.
You did have a blog post I wanted to chat with you about, and it was written on the Mighty, which I loved, and it was about getting rid of how are you.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that idea came because I'd been at the grocery store, and I hear every time, not even the grocery store, every stranger. So how are you? And I feel bad about saying I feel terrible right now. And so usually I just say fine or okay or just something dismissive because I know that they don't really want to know how I am. It's become interchangeable with hello. And that kind of annoys me that I feel like I have to lie or that I don't want to go into like how I am with you, stranger. Thank you. I yeah. So it, I just wish we would stop using that as a hello and instead just
Parcel
say
tongue.
hello.
I like the parcel tongue idea. I'm in for hissing at people. I
Oh
think
yeah, sure, sure, or some other geek language.
I mean we could
Elvish,
go
I mean.
Elven.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
beautiful language.
it's lovely. So
Yeah,
whatever you say will sound lovely in
that
Elvish,
works
I'm
for
sure.
me.
Yeah.
Have you ever done the social experiment and just told them exactly how you were?
I don't think I've ever done that. I'm so introverted, and maybe I don't sound that way because I introverted and shy are different things, I guess. So,
I have never
but
heard that before, but I like it.
yeah, I kind of interpret introverted as I recharge by myself, and being around people is sort of exhausting. It doesn't mean I'm shy. It just means, yeah, that's where I get my energy from, kind of. So, yeah, anyway, what was I saying?
We're talking about parcel tongue and for how are you? I've actually tried it before and told people exactly how I was doing. Just
Yeah?
I like messing with stuff. I get bored
Mm-hmm.
very easily.
So
Neutral chaos is probably, yeah. I'm not a mean person, but I get a little frustrated, especially if I have my canes or my wheelchair, and it's like, so how are you today? I'm like, okay, let's have fun.
yeah.
Well, I have a dislocated tibia, dislocated wrist, and my jaw's popping out. How are you?
Oh man. So what was the response to that?
Honestly, I make friends that way a lot of the time. I'm not
Oh,
mean
that's
about it.
funny.
I'm
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah.
it opens up chatter, and usually I get once we get past the oh my fucking god, how do you live like this?
Yeah.
We get into a good conversation. But
That's really
I
cool.
am not terribly introverted. My body makes me an introvert. I like
Sure.
meeting people,
Yeah.
which drives everyone in my life insane because everyone in my life is an introvert and are like, can you stop talking to strangers, please?
Well, maybe I'll have to phrase it differently then. I feel like my bowels are about to explode, because I don't know if that one will give
See what
you,
happens.
but maybe I'll have to try
You could go
that.
with like my guts are a TARDIS and I have an entire universe inside me
Ooh,
just
I
trying to get
like
out,
that a lot. I
right?
might have to steal that from you.
Go for it. Like, Cybermen and like, the Daleks warring inside your like small intestine.
Nice. Man, I should have used that in the book. Too bad it's
So
already
sorry, it's
published.
part two.
Sequel. All right.
So is there anything you wanted to talk about your book? I'm so sorry. I'm very good at being very chaotic.
Oh, no. I don't know if there's anything specific. Do you have any questions about it?
I have been asking a lot of the questions. A lot of what I found really interesting about your book was the superhero angle. Like I said, like superheroes, I have not read the comic books, but I do love the movies, and I
Mm,
especially the most recent ones. Like I loved Wonder Woman. Black
yeah.
Panther was probably my favorite movie. I'm watching that with
Yes. So
my
good.
smallest. I have a small teenager, well, will be teenager, and her watching like the most important smart person in the movie, not being a physical character, but being
Hmm.
a teenage girl who's brilliant,
Yeah.
meant the world to her. And but I
Yeah, it's
think,
so neat seeing yourself in the characters that you love.
and that's what drove me nuts when Wonder Woman came out and people were like freaking out about stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Representation really matters.
Yeah.
And it really, really matters. And
Maybe you don't notice if you're like a white male because you have all these
oh,
movies already, but this
where's
is
my
pretty
tea? I need to sip my tea. Um, but Whoopi Goldberg talking very publicly about how important Uhura was to her. That when she was a kid and she saw it on the TV, she screamed for her mom and her aunt, saying, "There's a black woman on TV and she's not a
Yep.
maid." And it's like, do you have any idea how important that is? Like,
I
and with
know.
your push for disability, like you, I've been a sick kid. I was a sick kid. I got very sick when I was 8, and I've been sick my whole life. When you look at the superheroes, they're always moving, and
Mhm.
that's been really hard. The only person you have is the X-Men. I'm so sorry, I just watched the movie last
Professor
night.
X.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please forgive me, everyone. I call me not a true geek if you need to, but I am not on my painkillers
You
yet,
know what?
so my brain is going to be
There's
like
no true geek. If
platforms.
you like whatever Doctor
Yeah.
Who, you're in, you know?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I have not had my painkillers yet. So if I actually find the correct name for anyone, it's going to be really impressive.
No
But
worries.
that's like the only person I could like really pull up really fast that it was like that's someone in a wheelchair who's a superhero.
Yeah.
But it
Um,
almost like superheroes always action, and we always try to pretend to be them when we're kids.
yeah, I understand why writers do that because it's hard to get around a physical disability. Um, when you're writing an action superhero, fantasy or sci-fi, whatever, is usually about going out on adventures. How do you do that with a disabled person? And it's not that it can't be done, it's just that it needs more thought and it's easier to do it with
I thought Iron Man would
able
have been the
people.
perfect character for someone who's disabled because the suit
Mm,
is what moves. So that could be almost like a wheelchair thing.
yeah. Yeah, totally. That would have worked. But unfortunately, Tony Stark's pretty fit and able in
I
the
mean, yeah, fun to look at too, but still, like, there's a whole bunch of suits. Let's put a disabled person in one of those.
Yeah. And then there's the troublesome thing with that is you have to figure out, okay, how do I get this character involved in this adventure, but also not erase their disability? Because
Mm.
that's also done a fair bit. Like Daredevil is blind. but he's not really blind.
With an
Like
asterisk.
it never it never really affects anything. So like how do you still have your character dealing with the problems of their disability while also participating in this grand adventure? I think is what you need to really wrestle with as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it shouldn't be that hard because I live a life with disability. So it's I
Yeah.
think the biggest problem is even in our own society is like you go out, you're not going to see a lot of people in wheelchairs because we don't have space created where people can
We're
easily
not
leave.
very accessible.
What? No, I hadn't noticed that.
Right?
I have never been dumped out of my wheelchair because the streets weren't paved properly.
Ugh, that's terrible. Yeah,
It does make for good YouTube video though. Um
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I talked to one of the people I interviewed in my book was paralyzed on half his side, and he talked about like the world just not being designed for like only using one hand or whatever. Like it's just like that makes sense. We're like yeah, able people just don't think about that. And like even I don't think about that because I don't have a physical disability. So I have to train my brain to think about these things that it's been trained not to, really, just because of the way society is.
was there anything in the interviews that surprised you?
Mm, I mean, I wasn't surprised by this, but just like the resilience and wisdom of all these people that I talked to was really amazing to me. Like, oh, and I don't know. Sometimes I am also surprised when people have just talk about the exact same things that I experience, like, oh, this anxiety and this exhaustion. And I'm like, yes, somebody else understands.
Yes.
Like, even though we don't have the exact same illness, you know, you're dealing with fibromyalgia and you're dealing with lupus and whatever. We have these. There are certain things that just span all disabilities and illnesses, it seems. Like one of them is exhaustion, and another one is just the way that society is not equipped to handle these things.
Yeah, and the spiral of hope. Like I feel like
Mm.
almost all of this chronic illness to have this deep feelings. Let's put it as feelings with the
Hmm.
spiral of hope, with the newest doctor, the newest treatment, the newest eating plan,
Yeah, maybe there's something that will help.
which of
There,
course can be
there's
found
always.
on the internet. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
some
Just
random
Google
person on Facebook. Yeah.
it. Or the acquaintance you just met that found out you're ill, and they're like, "Oh, you should try X."
Oh, okay. So we need to remove how are you from the lexicon and have you tried?
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
you just, those three
If you,
sentences.
oh man. I've also had like, so I'm a Christian and I have some church circles that I'm in. So I've also had like, have you just if you just pray more kind of
Oh, ouch.
theology. It's like
Oh,
that's not how that works,
you
you
just
know.
hurt me in the kidneys with that one. Like, oh.
Like they don't say it like that, but it's implied, you know.
Yeah, I
And
have
I'm
a very religious family, and there's overtones of like, or at least not necessarily like you be cured, but there's like the overtones of you might find more comfort if
yeah.
you, yeah, or this is God's plan has
Uh,
been.
and I mean, I do find comfort in faith, but not in the fact that you know God made this happen to me or something, and or I made this happen by not being faithful enough. That's the like the health and wealth gospel type thing. So
That's brutal.
yeah, so I discussed that a little bit, and there's a chapter on faith, and there's also a chapter on like other religions, not just Christianity. I interviewed a few other people because I was really interested to know how other faiths impacted other people's illnesses too.
What did you find with that? I'm asking because I have friends who are, it's not Christian, it's they're into this more new age like Marianne Williams stuff of
Oh
like
yeah.
crystals and nuts, like whatever makes you happy and that doesn't hurt someone else, please, blessed be, mazel
Yeah.
tov, like whatever gets you through the deep dark, I am all for you. What I just wanted to say about that was one of them got very sick, like very sick.
Mm.
And she was getting all these people talking about, it was her negative thoughts. So it was just like,
Oh dear.
it was like the worst of like more traditional ideas, but now packaged differently.
So the problem with that is it adds guilt on top of all these other crazy emotions that you're experiencing, and it's just not helpful.
Right. At all.
No, and it's especially not helpful to hear that from people you love, that you just want to understand what you're going through and to support you, and they're basically telling you, oh, it's your fault, you just need to do this
Do you
other
find
thing.
like fantasy and superheroes is like a way to explain things? Like it's oh gosh, words are bad for me today. Please forgive my brain fog.
No
Um
problem.
but like Star Trek was always good at like taking something huge that we didn't want to talk about and then
Mm,
repackaging it as fantasy so we could talk about it.
mm-hmm.
Do you find the same for like superheroes and fantasy?
I've never actually, I don't know if I've tried to use that, to use analogies with people I know who aren't geeks, because I don't think
Yeah, that's
they,
fair.
uh, sometimes I feel like they already think nerd and geek culture is like being a heathen or whatever. So so I don't try and go there. Uh, but a really interesting one. I interviewed my friend who's a Muslim, and she talked a little bit about believing, some people believing you don't need doctors if you have God, because faith healing and everything. All you need to do, like, you just pray, and why would you go to why would you go to do medicine if you really have faith? And I think that's a very dangerous idea.
I'm right there with you on
Yeah,
that. That's it seems to me that those two things can still hold hands, faith and science.
I think so. Like, I mean, I believe in God, and I also think that I can go see a doctor and that God allows science and things to exist for a reason. So I just think it's, yeah, super dangerous to be like, oh, there's these resources out there, we're just gonna ignore them. It's almost like being lazy, if that's not a terrible thing to say. Like, oh, I'm just gonna sit back and let God do all the work. I don't have to do anything, you know?
This is probably the
Like,
first time we've discussed religion on the podcast. This is
oh
really
yeah.
fun. I'm intrigued. I was raised multi-religious, so I always just have found it very fascinating.
I'm sometimes very critical and pessimistic of people of my own faith, because I get so frustrated with the attitudes that are out there.
My I will call her my auntie. Two of my aunties are very, 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 very Christian, and in a way that I find so beautiful because
Mm,
I feel like there's especially we're both in the United States, I believe, right?
what's that?
Are we both in the United
Oh,
States?
I'm in Canada.
Oh, you're in Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, you're not that far off on my time clock. And then
Yeah.
I thought, north, north. That's right. There's north.
Yeah.
There seems to be this very a more judgmental brand of Christianity that I've seen here, and they have this incredible ability to love everyone. And I just,
Mm,
while I'm not a Christian, I'm more spiritual. If
hmm.
I ever was going to be, like, they are the people I'd model myself after.
I
Like,
think,
they just have
yeah,
this incredible love for everyone's acceptance of everyone. Christianity is what they do, but
I feel like
whatever
that's
else
what
does, they're down.
Christianity is supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be all about love and acceptance, loving your neighbor as yourself, and
Yeah.
a
Taking
lot
care of
of
each
it,
other, take care of the
yeah,
stranger. Like,
exactly. Take care of the person you disagree with or don't like,
and
like,
now we're getting back to Doctor Who.
yes, Doctor Who is very good at doing
Not
that.
again a screwdriver. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
is what I like to think of as my own faith, and I just get really frustrated with the judgmental other brand of Christianity.
So how do you deal with that with being sick when people are coming at you with if you just prayed harder, if you just believe more?
Um, Generally,
trying to give resources to everyone who's listening.
yeah. I don't know if I have good advice for this. Generally, like I surround
You
like
don't have to. You could just say, don't know.
I
Wish
mean,
you the best.
my closest community are not that way. So I say if you are experiencing that, maybe find people who will accept you. I mean, there will always be that kind of people. Maybe you have a family member, maybe one of your best friends is that way, but I I find it extremely helpful to surround myself with a close community of people who understand or try to understand as best they can. I find the people who don't are often either strangers or acquaintances or just people who aren't super close to me. So it's easier for me to, you know, run to my husband or best friend, be like, "This person said this to me. Can you believe that?" And then they, you know, talk me down or whatever. So
Yay, best friends.
yeah.
That is wonderful. So the advice is to find definitely community where you feel at home.
Yeah. Oh, another
Nice.
of my pet peeves of things that people say to me that I hate has to do with having kids. So I had like a whole
Ah,
chapter about this in my
we
book.
can absolutely talk that one, please. I mean, it's I have children, but I definitely believe in choice.
I I think if you are disabled and sick and you want children, go for it. If you don't, that's okay too. Like it's a sacrifice I personally don't want to make. I find myself just too exhausted and I just don't. I love kids and I have godkids and nieces and nephews who I love, but the idea of like having my own just hasn't. It just hasn't been something that I want. We'll say that, and I find I get a lot of judgment on that one. Like, oh, but that's the purpose of being married, or that's what a woman is supposed to do, that kind of thing.
I've
um,
never understood the idea that ovaries meant you were supposed to parent.
yeah, I know. So there's I got really riled up. My husband and I were at the bank after pretty shortly after getting married, and we were like making our joint account, and the teller, who we never met before, was just asking us polite questions about our wedding and whatever, and then she said, "Oh, so kids are next."
Do you
And
tell
I
her
was
that you want to keep the money in your bank account? So
yeah,
no,
I know.
no kids.
So my husband already knows how I feel about this, and this isn't the first time this has happened. So I just kind of like sat there a little annoyed looking, and he answered. He's like, I can't remember what he said, or he said we're not having kids, I think is what he said. And she responded with, "Oh, not yet." And I was like, "Excuse me? Like you just assume that that's an okay thing to say? Like even if it wasn't just a choice, like what if we were trying to have kids and having trouble with it? Like what if I mean, this is something you should talk about before you get married, but what if we hadn't? Like, what if this is not a conversation we want to have with our random bank teller?
This is where
Like,
chaotic neutral would jump in, and I would start pretending to have a fight with my husband about this. Just,
yeah,
just have fun.
yeah, yeah, that would be hilarious. I'm too introverted for that. I can't do it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I would have an entertaining time with that one.
I would have liked to see you do that though.
We'll have to do
So
a comedy skit someday.
yeah. And so I get annoyed when people just assume that having children is what you're going to do, or that you should do it. Like, it comes back to the Christian community I've experienced, I think, a little bit, is that like procreation is kind of what God commands of you, kind of thing. And so I've had a little bit about that, like a little flack about that in some of my communities, that this is what you're supposed to do. I'm like, well, you know what? I have kids in my life that I am there for, and I do other things, and I like my job, and I don't really want to be a stay-at-home parent, and my husband doesn't either. So, if he did, maybe I would change my mind, but he doesn't really want to. So,
But
um,
just the idea that would null and void anyone who either can't or does not want to, like that's
yeah, like
so
what about,
ridiculous.
I mean, I know I have some issues in that physical area, so I might not even be able to have kids. Like, so what about people? I mean, I've never had it looked into that closely because I didn't want kids, so it didn't matter. But what about people who can't? Like, does that mean they're somehow lesser than these other people? It doesn't make sense to me. I think that's having children does not make you more of a person. I've also seen oh, you never know what true love is until you have your own kids. I've seen that one too. It's like, well, that's a pretty terrible thing to say to someone, like to anyone, but like, what about people who can't? And yeah, so that's a whole. I'm very passionate about this topic because
He's passionate about it.
yeah.
I made a choice. Actually, no, let me rephrase that. I did not make a choice. I had an incredible surprise, which I'm
Oh yeah.
very happy about, and
Mm-hmm.
he is wonderful. But as far as decisions, like that should be, you know, a friend asked me if they should have kids. Like they were very on the fence about it. They were turning 40 and they know that I do love being a mom. I've always wanted to be a
Mm-hmm.
mom. I am the person who would absolutely make that choice to have kids.
Yeah.
So want to know why I made that choice. And the only thing I can come up with is it's like, I really wanted to raise people that I thought would be good for the world. It was a
Yeah.
present to the
Totally.
planet that I really wanted to give. It was a choice on my part that I wanted to give
Yeah.
something out there of two people who I raised in hopefully a way that makes them better, compassionate humans.
Mm, I think
That's
that's
it.
wonderful.
Like that's the
Yeah.
only reason you can give. You can't like
Yeah.
anything else is kind of I don't know. It strikes me as a little crunchy with I need someone to take care of me when I'm older. It's like, there's a lot of nursing
Yeah.
homes, but that didn't work out. Like
I
there
think there are bad reasons to have children that people
yeah.
don't think about.
And we're lucky enough to live in an age of science where we get to make better choices if we have
Mm-hmm.
access. If we have access,
Yeah.
it's amazing to be able to make these decisions that, we can choose things
Yeah.
that like my great grandparents could not choose. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
very glad to be able to protect my health with only two. I
Yeah.
would not have survived the third. I barely survived the second. So, but I'm very glad I have both of them.
Exactly. Like it. Yeah.
But it
Um,
is interesting how people feel like they can make these choices for others.
yeah, that's one people seem to be very opinionated about for some reason.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder why. Like I don't see a lot of opinions about like what I'm going to do for a living. Like
I know, and you don't see people like criticizing your decision, other decision. Like it doesn't. I don't know. It didn't make sense to
no, like the one
me.
weird thing is like I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but like that your
That's okay.
body is no longer private, it's public.
Yeah.
And your choices become very public. So even whether to have a child or not, or if you're pregnant, what you're eating becomes a topic of conversation of those around you that you've never met.
Yeah,
What
actually,
clothes
one
you're
of my
wearing.
friends was pregnant recently, and I asked her because when I was sitting next to her, I had this sudden urge to like touch her stomach. And I was like, that's not an okay thing for me to do. And so then like I asked her if she had people doing that, like random people. And she's like, yes, all the time. Like random people will just come up to her and like touch her stomach. And she's like, that's not okay. I'm like, that's so weird that I mean, I'm her friend. I don't think I would have the urge to touch a random stranger's stomach, but I think some people do that, and it's very strange to me. Like suddenly, when you're pregnant, your body isn't just yours anymore; it's the community's. Like it's, I don't know, it's so weird.
I
Uh,
feel like you would understand that, like, and people with chronic illness understand that because our choices in what we eat, what we do, what we wear, what our jobs are, those become public discussions as well.
yeah, um, people are very judgmental about other people's problems. Maybe it's like, oh, I don't have to focus on my own problems if I focus on
I
somebody
wonder
else.
some of it is just like, oh gosh, there was a movie I was watching where Oh gosh, Helen Hunt. Shoot, Brain Cells. It was an Oscar Wilde play turned movie, but basically
Okay.
she was like, do you even want to know the answer to the question? He's like, yeah, actually, no, I was just asking. Basically, was the whole gist of it. And I wonder how much of this is just people don't like silence. I certainly don't, obviously. But
Yeah.
like, I wonder how much of this is just like a bless you response. Like you sneeze, someone says bless you. You say hello, someone says how are you. They
Mhm.
say I'm getting married. They're like, great, when are kids? Like I wonder how much is, I don't
Yeah.
even know if we want the response. We're just kind of like conditioned, and we just need to condition to parcel tongue or
I think you're
Elvish or
right. I
something
think
better.
a lot of it is I don't know what to say. I'll say this thing that seems like I should say it, or like
Yeah.
the first thing that comes to my head, or some of these things have been socially ingrained in people, and so they think it's okay, and when it's just really not.
We need to come up with a list of better questions to ask strangers.
I know.
Like it's like with kids, like we shouldn't ask them like, what are you going to be anymore? Like we certainly
Yeah.
should not
Oh
ask a
my
small
gosh.
child if they have a boyfriend or girlfriend. That has to end now.
Mm.
Like here and now, stop. Like ask them what book they liked or like what
I
was,
also have to like I say the wrong thing all the time. You know,
me too.
I don't want to come across as like
Read the
judgmental.
reviews. I say
Yeah.
the wrong thing all the time.
Sure. Yeah. Like I'm definitely not perfect in this regard. I am trying to learn, but one thing that I've been trying to say less is calling kids like cute. And, oh,
Mm.
you know, you're so cute. Oh, look at your what you're wearing, that kind of thing. Because I'm like, that's just training them to be noticing appearance, which I don't want to be doing. But it's really hard because that's like the first thing. Oh, it's so cute. You're so cute.
Uh-huh.
You know. So like, you just have to try and think of other things to say, and it's
Seriously. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I have a daughter and like learning to not comment on appearances was like one of the things I was super committed to. And I do fall
Hmm.
down because she's adorable.
I know, right? It's so hard. All kids are adorable, so it's hard not
And
to
I didn't
comment.
want to go too far the other way too. I was raised like 1970s as baby X, so my parents never commented on my appearance. So I kind of grew up with
Oh,
like this,
yeah.
like, oh, I must be hideous. So
Uh-huh. Yeah, like you want them to know they're beautiful for sure, but
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I
No.
defaulted on beauty's a tool. You choose how much you want to focus on it,
Yeah.
but you decide what you want to put your energy into. Your intelligence is an incredibly important tool. Your creativity is
Yeah.
an important tool. Do you want to put a ton of time into the appearance? Because you are lovely. Do you want to put time into that, or you just want to just let it like you're just lovely and you put
Yeah.
and your focus into your creativity and your intelligence? Like
Yeah.
decide on which one
Yeah, I
is.
love
And
that.
she decided
I
her
think
creativity is also on painting her face. She loves special effects makeup.
nice.
That's been her jam lately.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I love watching the shows. So we are totally obsessed with Face Off, and
Oh, that's funny. That's awesome. I think makeup can be really fun. Like, I have a friend
Canvas,
who does that. And
arts
like
and crafts.
people who cosplay, I'm so like, oh, I wish I could do that. That's
You
amazing.
know how much I want to Glowforge just so I can like. I don't want to cosplay. I just want to create the costumes.
Right? No, I just want to wear them. So you
We
create
can
them.
work together
I'll
here.
wear them. Yeah.
Who's your dream
Yeah.
cosplay? What would you?
Oh man. I want to say like maybe from Star Wars. There's oh, what's her name? She's from Star Wars Rebels, and she wears like the Mandalorian armor, but it's all like spray painted, bright colors.
I
I
love
want
that.
that. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm being a bad geek here. I know her name. I just can't come up
We
with
are
it.
geeks with disabilities and chronic illness. The fact that we can
Yeah,
come up
it's
with any of
okay.
the names, like this is going to become Pictionary very soon, where we start like charades, where we start miming like what the the
Yeah.
creature is. My
Oh,
husband
Sabine
plays.
Wren. I got it. Her name is
Yes,
Sabine. Yes, she's amazing. Anyway, I want to cosplay as
my husband
her.
plays Call of Cthulhu on a YouTube channel, and he's developing a disabled character right now. So I was like, there's a lot missing from these characters. I think if you played a disabled character, that would force them to start doing campaigns where you have to rethink ability wise and whatever.
Oh yes, I should pick a disabled character to cosplay. That's true.
Wouldn't that be neat? I'm like trying, like, I want to just create like wheelchairs that are cosplay. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
my wheelchair is pretty badass. Mine looks very Professor X. I got this very high tech wheelchair, but
Nice.
Yes, I love it, but I really want to play with it. It's already pretty beaten up, so I'm like, it's beaten up already. I can
Man, it's
create something.
problematic that like Professor X is really the only one I can think of though, because
In a
you'd have to
wheelchair?
shave your head, and that's just
Do
you need a
you know
woman
how much I want to
constantly.
shave this? Okay, so everyone listening, I'm sorry, this is one of our episodes. It's not going to be up on YouTube, so you don't get to see. But if you've seen me before, my hair's down to my waist, and it drives me
Oh my.
insane. I hate it's like
Oh yeah.
unfull hair. I want to shave this off so bad.
Oh,
But
what's stopping you?
shaming for my children. I after each kid, I cut my hair to my ears because small ones love to yank, and
Oh
my
yeah, that makes
son
sense.
yanked like almost a chunk of hair out of my head when he was a baby. So every kid, I cut my hair to ears, and they have stated that I look like a deranged soccer mom with short hair. So
Oh,
they've gone so far as to my daughter brushes my hair because she wants me to keep it long. She's like, I will take care of it if you will keep it long. For crying out loud, I feel very bullied right now.
oh, that's hilarious.
They do brush my hair out for me, which is very nice. But it's I'm ethnically half Jewish with the super tight curly hair, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
my mom has the super thin, fine, very blonde hair.
Hmm.
So I get dreadlocks underneath all the time. Like it just
Oh
all
wow, yeah,
goes
yeah, yeah.
into like this sort of like mat
Should
back
just go
here.
all dreadlocks. Just do all dreads.
That would
It'll
not
look
look good
great.
on me. I am
No.
I am not someone who can pull off anything. Like I went into my hairdresser's. I was like, "How about bangs?" And she's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, no, 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 no." I'm like, why? She's like, "Uh-huh. I'm looking at you right now. What hair stuff do you own at home? Shampoo,
Yeah.
conditioner? Does that count?" It's like
I
curling
know.
iron, hair dryer? No. Okay, no, you don't get bangs.
I
Great.
know. I feel so awful when I go to my hairdresser because I don't go often enough.
Okay, so that interview ended way, way earlier, faster than we thought it was going to. Again, recording during COVID, and Zoom just was not stable enough for us to finish. But I hope you enjoyed the interview. We were basically just discussing hair. So um, if that interests you, please feel free to send me a message. I will tell you all about how hard it is to get to a hair salon and sit in a salon chair, especially with Ehlers-Danlos and Lena Headback. Jaw dislocations are a thing, I promise. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Next week will probably be Eva's. And please take a listen to that. Head over to our show notes. Become a patron if you can and want to. If that is not in your ability, please head on over to sharing the episode. That'd be a very kind and generous thing for you to do. This has been an unprecedented world right now, and if you listen to this episode, you probably saw a lot of themes, and one of the big themes you're probably aware of is compassion, and that we all need to have a lot of compassion for each other right now and to reserve judgments as much as possible. So I think that it's never been more appropriate to say be kind, be gentle, and whenever way works for you, be a badass. Take care of yourselves.